So let me just again, we haven't met in a couple of weeks, but I want to go over something that I don't remember if Wayne brought it up. A footnote in the new, I don't know who brought up a footnote in the new Reb Yaakov, because I don't think that footnote appears in the old edition. Wayne, do you have the new edition of Reb Yaakov al Torah?
No, I have the old one.
Okay, so somebody brought it up. I don't remember who. Maybe it was Mac Schenker, could be. Anyway, Mac's not here this week, I think, because of the time difference in America. But in any event, I mentioned to you that in the shul, in the white shul in Lawrence or Far Rockaway, it's on the border. When Reb Yaakov gave this drasha of this concept of Mitzrayim, that it was like, I'm going to call it an NCSY weekend, right, for 3 days and come back to Egypt and continue on in the exile, but being strengthened and getting a shot in the arm, so to speak. So one fellow, cynically, of course, but he really meant it, said to Rabbi Yaakov, what about Medina Yisrael today? Is that also an NCSY weekend? Because we know we have an NCS weekend that's 420 years. Reb Yaakov said it in his drasha. There's a second base of which was an NCSY weekend to keep us going for 2,000 years. So you need 420 years of a weekend, right? So he said, could it be that Eretz Yisrael today is, right? And then somebody pointed out in a footnote, but I didn't want to hear the footnote yet because there's the third place that Reb Yaakov talks about this, which we'll see this week. And even though, again, it's the same Yesod, but here the ramifications are completely different. Okay? So let's just quickly recap for like a minute or two. Let me give you from a scholarly approach. I'm not really sure. This is really what a scholar would have to do. I'm not really sure where this idea came to Reb Yaakov. In other words, when did it first hit Reb Yaakov in the head that there's an idea of that if the Jews are going down the drain, God does something to spiritually uplift them to keep them going, right? When did that happen? I'm not exactly sure. And I never really tried to trace it exactly. Did it start with, in other words, in Egypt? In other words, Reb Yaakov was assuming that Moshe Rabbeinu would not lie. And therefore, he'd go out for 3 days. And of course, Reb Yaakov immediately wanted to know, why would you want to go out for 3 days? So he came up with this idea that, this was to be machazik the Jewish people to go back to Egypt and finish the 400 years. Did it come from that? Did it come from Chazal, like the Chazal that Reb Yaakov keeps repeating, that there was no Oren in the second base of Mikdash, but Reb Yaakov has a Mishnah that says that they knew where the Oren was, that there was no Oren. That's a Gemara in Yoma. Okay, there was no Oren. Okay, we couldn't find the Oren, but they could find the Oren, but they didn't. Right? They knew where it was, but they didn't take it out. That's a much stronger idea of second base, which was not a real geula, right? And it was just this 420-year weekend to get the Jews into the diaspora that we are in today in Chutz La'aretz. Okay, so I'm not sure where Yaakov got it, but number one, okay, we have the place in the Torah with Moshe Rabbeinu and the parshanut of the pasuk Od Nega Echad Avi al Mitzrayim, and then he'll send you Kishalcho Kola, which Reb Yaakov learns up. That obviously means send you out completely because that wasn't the original plan. The second place we had was in Chagai, where again Reb Yaakov learns up the pasuk in an original manner and says when it says Bayit Hazeh Acharon, it doesn't mean anything else but Acharon. It is the last bayit, but not like the Christians believe that it's the last bayit because there won't be a third one, but it was the last one to be spoken about because in the 25th year, Yecheskel spoke about a bayit, which is bayit shlishi, right? So this is the last bayit, and therefore it could very well be, why was this the last bayit? Why didn't they talk about it immediately? Because it was an afterthought by God, a necessity that God saw the Jews in the exile need to come back to Eretz Yisrael in order to again, give them a very strong shot in the arm so they'll survive the exile that we're in today, right? And that needed the Anshe Knesset Gdola, and that needed all the rabbinic decrees and everything like that. Those were the two places. There's a third place that we'll see, right, where today it's the same idea, but all of a sudden, Rabbi Yaakov, the circumstances are very, very different than we've had till now. But before we do that, when I sent you the notes, the first page says intro, because I had already marked number one, and I forgot that this should be number one, so I marked that intro. Here is this is the new Reb Yaakov ala Torah, okay, and here he adds something which I don't think is in the. You could check it. I don't think it's in the Emes Yaakov previous editions, and it's at the bottom, okay. And you have underlined Od Hosif Rabbeinu Baal Peh. Okay. Now, when I'm reading this, I want you to bear in mind that Reb Yaakov said to the fellow who said, maybe that's Eretz Yisrael today. And Reb Yaakov said, you said it, not me. Okay. Which sounds very much like Reb Yaakov was saying, you know what? It could be that we're not going to be here forever. It's just a passing thing. We're going to talk a lot about this week. And there's a piece from Reb Yaakov that we'll talk about next week, which is also very interesting about this issue. So Reb Yaakov says, yes.
So sure, which page are you on now?
Now it's page Emes Yaakov Shin Chav Ches, and on the top I wrote the word intro. This week you should have gotten it.
No, I didn't get anything this week.
Look in the look in the WhatsApp group. You know what? I'll send it to you again.
Oh, I asked Donna if she sent it.
No, she did send it. She did send it.
It's in the WhatsApp group.
I got it.
Oh, you got it? And Michael Citron got it?
It's in the WhatsApp group for all of us.
We have
No,
it.
it was sent just a few hours ago. Oh, okay.
Yeah, she doesn't.
No, I sent it late.
Oh,
I looked an hour ago. I didn't see anything.
First of all, I had a hafsakat chashmal in Givat Ze'ev, so I couldn't scan it. Okay. Secondly, I usually do it at lunchtime, but the secretary of Midrash Rachel quit, so she's not there any longer. So I didn't have anyone to do it for me. Well,
which person was that? What was her name?
What?
What was her name?
Rivka. I don't remember her last name, but she lives in Ramat Beit Shem. It's just too hard for her to come in, so she just said she's leaving. Okay. Anyway. So at the bottom, if you look, I underlined for you Od Hosif. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
It's in the footnote. Okay. Od Hosif Rabbeinu Baal Peh. Okay. Now I don't know where he got this from, but I'm going to assume that he's correct. And I just want to bear in mind, even though I'm saying this publicly, that this fellow, who's a very big Talmud Chacham, lives in Lakewood. He's retired, and he tends to be on the right side. I think I've mentioned this more than once. And I've mentioned that sometimes he tries to kvetch in something that I don't believe Reb Yaakov said. Od Hosef,
right,
yes.
Right side is in Haredi, right side.
Exactly, right. I don't mean on the correct side. I mean on the right side.
Reb Shurin, what pasuk is this going on? Where are we?
Oh, this is the inyan of, okay, this is the inyan in Shmos. I think it's in Parshas Bo, where Reb Yaakov talks about the months of the year being in Aramaic, and the Ramban said that's in order to remember the Geula of Bavel. So we took their months, and Reb Yaakov says just the opposite, that it's in order to remind us we're still in Galus that we took the months, the Persian months. And Rabbi Daniel Neustadt, who's the publisher of this, the editor, he tries to kvetch that Reb Yaakov was sort of not disagreeing with the Ramban. And Reb Yaakov, told me I'm disagreeing with the Ramban. Okay. So I've seen this more than once already. And again, he's a big Talmud Chacham, and I want to quote him in Koma Munach, but I heard some things from Reb Yaakov, and therefore I'm going to be critical about it. Od Hosef Rabbeinu Baal Peh. Okay, Shekein Oleinu Lahavid, Gam et Hakamat Medina Israel B'Yameinu. That it's upon us incumbent to understand the rising of Medina Israel in our day. Shalachar Churban Agadol Vayish Shenechas B'kerev Sheiris Pleita, after the great Churban and giving up of hope that grasped in the midst of the Sherita Pleita, the remnants of the Holocaust, what happened to them? They had a tremendous yeosh, right? They saw, millions of their brethren in Eastern Europe be killed, right? And is this God? Is this Judaism? Okay, and we'll talk about this as well. He puts in here something interesting. The matzav of the Jews of Russia, meaning you had millions of Jews that were completely being forced to assimilate out of their Judaism. We're all familiar with this. We're all familiar with it because of the fact that we lived in the time of the refuseniks. Am I correct? I'm maybe a little bit older, you're a little bit younger, but we all know some of the great refuseniks. There's literally in the 20s or 30s that are very, very famous, right? Including Sharansky and Yosef Mendelovich, v'chule, right? Reb Yaakov felt that because he had family in Russia and a brother that became a communist, and he visited him, and he visited his sister as well in Russia, who didn't become a communist and remained Masorati in hiding. So people just like sort of, they saw that God is just not helping the Soviet Jews, of course. And parenthetically, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I'll say it anyway. Meir Kahane didn't want to blame it on God. He wanted to blame it on us. He says, God wants to help the Jews, but we're not letting him. But I'm going to let him. Okay? And then that came out. And of course, there's a lot of different things that came out. If you ever want to read a really good book by a woman named Pam, I forget her last name, Hidden Heroes, right? It's an excellent book talking about this whole issue. So Reb Yaakov says, V'chein la'or matzavam ha'no'ash v'avud shel Yahadut Russia, sibei v'HaKadosh Baruch et hakamat ha'medina v'hanitzchonot b'milchamot k'dei l'chazek ha'zehut ha'yudit v'limnoa nisu'ei ta'arovet. Okay? That la'or matzav ha'noash of the Jews and God. In other words, what does that mean? He created Eretz Yisrael because of the Holocaust survivors and the survivors in Russia. You know as well as I do, right? That if we talk about Russia, the survivors, the ones who live in Russia post, in the middle of communism, would never have felt a connection to Judaism without Eretz Yisrael. Ask Sharansky, ask Joseph Mendelovich, ask them all, ask the secular ones. Forget about the religious ones, ask the secular ones, okay? Sibei v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu hakomas ha'medina v'hanitzchonot b'milchamot k'dei l'chazek ha'zehut ha'yudit limno. That's after 1967. That was the big war. The Soviet Jews, the refuseniks, rose after 67. Okay? For Ayin Oremus Yaakov, Malachim Bet, and Tehillim. The morning Malachim Bet we're going to do next, hopefully even this week. I hope it'll be even this week, but certainly next week. Okay? There's a very interesting, again, that article, Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky recorded from a cassette tape by Reb Yaakov. And Reb Yosef, I trust, but 120%. Okay? For Hosef Rabbeinu.
Rabbi Shurin,
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you while you were reading it out, I went back to the original volume, the original printing of Emes Liachvo.
Right, got it.
And it does appear there. The beginning does appear there in footnote 19. I'll read you what it says there because it is different.
Give us a page number.
It starts out with the same.
What?
Give us a page number.
In the original edition, it's Amud Reish Ayin Bet. Footnote 19.
Go ahead.
Look in what you're reading now, and you'll see where it goes different. Excuse me. I'm sorry. The bottom of footnote 17, not 19, 17.
Go ahead.
and this is the second part of the footnote. עוד הוסיף רבנו בכמה הזדמנויות שכך עלינו להבין גם את הקמת מדינת ישראל בימינו, שלאחר החורבן הגדול והייאוש שנאחז בקרב שארית הפליטה, וכן לאור מצבם הנואש והאבוד של יהדות רוסיה, סידר הקדוש ברוך הוא הקמת המדינה כדי לחזק את הזהות היהודית ולקיים את הקשר שבין יהדות הגולה לכלל ישראל. Period. End of comment.
Okay.
Right. I was going to say, because, to say that Nisuei Ta'arovit, I would say Israel hasn't done very well then, because America is over 80% intermarriage, and what's left of Russian Jewry is all Goyim practically. So, but with this line,
I have a comment about that. I hear what you're saying. It's a question.
No, but what Pinchas just read, that it's mechazek the kasher, I think that can't be denied.
Right. That and here he actually leaves that out a little bit. He took it out. He doesn't say that kesher. I don't know why he left it out. It's a good point, but in the new edition he leaves it out.
He is writing things al dat atzmo that I mean.
Right. So then he adds v'hosef Rabbeinu. I think this is already not there. Am I correct? Shemikim Kiyam Medina.
Well, this is new. It wasn't in there.
That's new, right?
Totally.
Okay. V'hosef Rabbeinu Shemikim Sheikar Kiyam Medina hayel lechazek et zehut hayehudit v'limno nesu tarovus lachein kasher haviru et chok mi Yehudi v'tarvu im hagoyim im kein botelatam umeoz hitchilu lereid mata atkan tochen dvara. Okay, so this is the addition that Reb Yaakov says, that since they didn't pass the law of mi Yehudi kahalacha, they refused to put in kahalacha, right? We know that till today. So from that time on, so that now intermarriages won't be stopped, right? Because you can bring Goyim to Israel who converted conservative and reform, correct? Reconstructionists, whatever it is, right? And therefore, from that time on, Israel went down. Now, I could see that Reb Yaakov might have said this, but I could tell you when he said it. He said it after the Yom Kippur War. Okay? After the Yom Kippur War, he said that this was a message that we need the Zeyut Yehudi al pi halacha, and no other way. Okay? Now, did Reb Yaakov feel like this afterwards? Also, I'm not sure if he kept this idea, right? Because the Jews were rising again in after the Yom Kippur War. There were other things going on where the Jews, again, they didn't conquer any land, for any serious land afterwards, but we do see that there was a peace deal with Egypt. There were peace treaties, right? With
they went to start living. Begin became prime minister. The Aguda entered the government. What did he think about things like that? Correct.
So, Reb Yaakov, I just was going to say this, that the first time Reb Yaakov related positively to a prime minister was Menachem Begin. And I remember the words he used when he met Menachem Begin in Ramosha Feinstein's apartment on the Lower East Side. Okay. Begin refused to speak Hebrew because he said, L'chvod the Gedolei Torah, I want to speak Yiddish. Okay? When Reb Yaakov met with Golda Meir, she refused to speak Yiddish, only Hebrew or English. Okay? Big difference. So Reb Yaakov said to me, Begin, Erez Geven, not Erez Geven, because I think he was still alive. Begin is a Yiddish mensch. That's what he said. And we know that Begin was the most observant of all the prime ministers, maybe till now, except for what's his name?
Naftali Bennett.
But Begin got the what do you call it? Got him a phone. The halachic place in the Gush Etzion in the Alon Somet got him a gramophone when he became a red phone that only he would answer if it came from America. It was a phone that only the White House could use, and he put it on grama. Which I want to tell you something. I think he could have probably gotten a header to answer it straight away from America. Probably got some head, but he put it on grama, and it was a gramophone. Okay, I remember them writing about it in the paper. So I remember Begin fasting on Tisha B'Av in America in 1978. He came to America and happened to fall out on Tisha B'Av. Okay, actually during the 9 days, and Menachem Begin sat in Good Morning America, something like that, in the morning. They interviewed him, and they poured him a glass of water, and it just remained there. He didn't take it, right? And when the UJA served meat during the 9 days, he asked if they had fish. I remember that. Okay, so it's hard to say that Begin was not very conscious of halacha. Okay, so that's why I think Reb Yaakov was correct when he said this, but Begin was really the first one. And it could be, Stu, what you're saying, it could very well be that Reb Yaakov started looking on Medina to show more positive during Menachem Begin's era.
Menachem Begin's from Brisk. He was a Brisker.
Brisker, right.
He was from Brisk.
Right. And you don't know that what's his name? His Baal Plukta. He was prime minister for a week or two.
Shimon Peres.
Shimon Peres was from Volozhin. So I remember Professor Lev coming to visit Reb Yaakov in Beit Fagan, and he says to Reb Yaakov, he spoke in Yiddish to Reb Yaakov. He said, Shimon Peres from Volozhin, and Menachem Begin from Brisk. Shtei shitot. That's what he said. Shtei shitot.
Anyway. And Begin lived as a rabbi. He lived as a rav. So he in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. Anyway, the point over here is, look, so Reb Yaakov was clearly saying over here that because they didn't pass me Yehudi, so things started going downhill. That's what he attributed the Yom Kippur War to, the fact that they didn't pass me Yehudi, right? And they allowed basically Goyim, according to halacha, to come into the. By the way, when Golda Meir said she wants to draft girls, that was another downhill for Reb Yaakov. Reb Aaron Soloveitchik, I was sitting with Reb Aaron Soloveitchik, and he says, I can't understand your grandfather. I said, you mean what he said about Eretz Yisrael? He said, yeah. What did Reb Yaakov say? I wouldn't tell anyone with a daughter to make Aliyah today. That's what he said when Golda Meir threatened to start drafting yeshiva girls, which was absurd. But she threatened to do that. Reb Yaakov took it very seriously, and he was very upset about it. Reb Aaron Soloveitchik didn't think Reb Yaakov should make such an announcement that people should not come on Aliyah, right? But I mean, again, I love them both. Reb Aaron was my uncle, and Reb Yaakov was my grandfather. And my grandfather was at least 20 years older than him. But I have to tell you, Reb Yaakov's respect for Reb Aaron Soloveitchik was through the roof. Okay.
Sure, these additional footnotes in the newer edition. I mean, how confident can we be that these are authoritative in the name of Reb Yaakov?
So I can't be 100% because even if I'm assuming he's telling you what he heard, who did he hear it from? That he's not telling us. Okay, and that's Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky does put down who he heard it from. Okay, and that's why the article on Sefer Malachim is going to be very important because it's going to touch on this. And that Reb Yosef heard from Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky on a tape on Sefer Malachim. So there's no two ways about it. So there we're going to take a look and compare it to this. There's another place here where Rishimos Rabbeinu Mishnas Hey Tafresh Tzadi Katav B'Zel Lashon. Okay, this is related, but not completely. Okay, but this you can't deny because this says Rishimos Rabbeinu. I don't know where this is, but I 100% believe him that Reb Yaakov wrote this. Okay, Tzionut. Okay, where did he write about Tzionut? I haven't found it yet, but he had a piece that he wrote about Tzionut, not connected necessarily to Tanach, to Shas. I have the stuff connected to Tanach, to Shas, to Mishnah, Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, Rambam. Tzionut, Mikora Yatsa Me'e Emuna B'Bias Hagol Kipshuta. Now he's not talking about here religious Tzionut, because this would be absurd. think about what Reb Yaakov just said. Its source comes from the lack of belief in Mashiach kipshuto. Okay, there isn't a dati lumi person who does not believe. I mean, anyone from the center all the way to the right who doesn't believe that Mashiach is going to come kipshuta. They just think that he's on his way already. He's only a few miles away, and they think that they can bring him. Okay, doing what they're doing. Okay, that's in itself a whole issue we can discuss. But clearly, this is tzionut, the non-from tzionut. Now, I told you again, I'll repeat again. Reb Yaakov had nothing to do with Mizrahi, only Aguda. Okay, I'm going to bring in parenthetically. Okay, my mother studied in Kovna, in the Beis Yaakov in Kovna. Okay, I don't remember if I told you this, but I'm going to tell it to you again. Okay, with Rebbetzin Volba, just so we'll get it a little bit sharper. Okay, Rebbetzin Volba wrote a book about her life in the Holocaust, a great book, Emunah Balelot, but she leaves out a very important thing about the Beis Yaakov in Kovna, and I'm going to tell it to you. My mother said there was a machlokis whether to teach the girls in Yiddish or in Hebrew. Okay, they wanted to combine the Mizrahi school with the Aguda school. Okay, now I have to give you a background. Today, that wouldn't be possible. Okay, to take MTA and YU's high school and put it in Lakewood, in a high school in Lakewood, it's not going to happen. It's impossible. But in those days, the Tzioni didn't look much different than the Haredi. Okay, what do I mean? And this you have to know. There were Tzionim that had kapatas and Hamburgs, right? Reb David Lifshitz, right? He was the Suval Garav. He was a Tzioni. Reb Yaakov was anti-Tzioni. Okay, so they looked very much. If you looked at Reb David Lifshitz, he looked firmer than Reb Yaakov. I feel he looked firmer than Reb Yaakov. He had the kaput. He had a longer beard. He still had the old-fashioned yarmulke. You know which yarmulke? The one that stands up, that Rav Moshe wore, Rav Shach wore. Reb Yaakov was modern. He got the new yarmulke, right? But they still had the old one. They looked firmer. And you don't think, for instance, Rav Herzog looked firm, right? He was completely Tzioni, right? In other words, the point over here is that they had a machlokis whether to teach in Yiddish or in Hebrew, because the Tzionim wanted Hebrew for obvious reasons. We want you to go to Eretz Yisrael. And the other people were fighting Tzionut. They wanted it in the old Yiddish. That was the Beis Yaakov reputation. That was, when it first started, right? They decided on the Hebrew to get the Beis Yaakovs together. Okay, my mother told me, she remembers this, and my mother could prove it. You know why? Because she spoke Hebrew fluently. And there's no way she learned Yiddish and came to Israel and didn't eat ulpat. Okay, it's not shaykh. Okay, so why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because my mother brought a letter home from Mizrahi, because she used to go on Shabbos to the Mizrahi groups. Okay,
she told me. I'm a witness.
Yeah.
She told me on Friday night they used to go and sing.
Right. So she brought a letter from the head to Reb Yaakov. Reb Yaakov, it was a long letter. She remembers. Reb Yaakov took it. He sat down, put on his glasses. I think took off his glasses to read it. He didn't comment on it. And I don't have the letter. I would love to have that letter. Okay. I don't even know who wrote it. You'd have to research who the head was. But he wrote the letter, right? And Reb Yaakov didn't comment, but my mother felt that he didn't take it seriously enough. That's what my mother felt. But okay, Reb Yaakov was sold on the Aguda and not on Mizrahi. Okay? But here he's definitely talking about the secular Zionists. Okay? He says that they didn't believe in Mashiach Kipshuta. What did they believe? They believe Tikkun Olam. The Jews are going to be taka in the world. Right? We're going to build a state, and that's going to be not a Torah state that's going to be a model for the whole world. It's not going to be an Arshal Torah. It's going to be Or LaGoyim in a secular sense.
Okay. Question, but why do you have to go this far? Why do you have to go all the way to Mashiach? Why couldn't he just say they don't believe in Hashem? I mean, I'm talking about real secular labor Zionists.
Right.
It wasn't part. I'm not talking about the individuals because Rav Kook went to kibbutzim and married people left, right, and center.
Sure.
But as an ideology, they didn't believe in Hashem. Why go all the way to Mashiach? Just start with Hashem.
I'll tell you why. Because he's trying to figure out where it came from. This idea of we're going to be a light unto nations in the secular way, right? He says that came from the fact that they believed in a concept called Mashiach, but it's not like the frum people say. It's like there's no real person that's coming and going to redeem us, or it's going to become a time when there's not going to be Shubad Malchus and we'll be learning Torah without any problems. It's going to be that we're going to be a light unto nations. And not through God. You're right. Many of them didn't believe in God, but they believed in Jewish culture in a very strong way. Yeah. They believed in Jewish culture very strong, that we have the right culture. We have the right ideology without Torah, right? So that's what their idea of Mashiach was. And therefore he says, and from then onward, this is what Reb Yaakov wrote. Every place where there's a lack of emunah, there, right? Tzionut, he's referred to, blossoms. Okay? In other words, wherever there's kfira, tzionut blossoms. V'sham mishtares, and there it gets rooted. Aval ikar kiyumo sof, yeshlo schut hakiyum, b'toch klal Yisrael. Listen to Reb Yaakov's writing here. This is scary. He says, but it's the essence of his existence. At the end of the day, it has a schus b'toch klal Yisrael. How did it get that schus? Why did God allow it? He's basically saying, mipnei shahalolu she'ena ma'aminim b'geula atida. These secular Zionists that don't believe in the geula, the coming of the geula, hey mitrachim mkol machtzavtam lule amunatam zot. They would even get more distant from Judaism if they didn't believe this. If they didn't have what we call secular Zionism, they would have been completely out. There would have been nothing left to them. Okay? Take away Zionism from Shimon Peres, and you've taken away everything, right? From anybody, from Golda Meir. Take away Zionism, and you're immediately married to a guy. It's finished. So Zionism, even in a secular way, help Judaism, Reb Yaakov says. That's pretty good. That's pretty interesting. Very few Gedolim would ever say that secular Zionism is anything good about it. Reb Yaakov was saying, no, there's something good about it. What's it? Schus kiyum. That's unbelievable, these words. What is it? The Lule, he says, yeshlo schut hakiyum b'toch klal Yisrael. It has a schut, right? Even though they don't believe in the Gula, because it keeps them in the fold of some sort of Judaism, Lulei Amunosim Zos, right? They would be mitrachakim mikor machtzavtam. They would even go further away from the source of their origin, if not of this belief. Va'af shehevelhu, even though it's hevel, there's nothing to it. B'chol zos machizatam. It attaches them to the whole klal. They have something in common. Let's say the Dati Lumi person has something in common with the non-Dati person who's a Zionist. Now, unfortunately, in recent times, that hasn't worked too well. But till 30 years ago, it was working great. Okay? Anyway, and let's think about this. Okay? One of the big things of the Dati Lumi world that Reb Yaakov didn't live to see, but I'm sure he would have said this, okay, is they're called by the secular Zionists, what are they called? Messianic people, okay? Exactly what Reb Yaakov is saying here. You're the Messianic people who believe in the real Mashiach. That's stupid, okay? That's stupid. We believe in a Kloli Tikkun Olam Mashiach. Right? So that's where the machlokas started becoming. Okay? With the Haredim never talk about Mashiach. When was the last time a Haredi put together Medina Yisrael Mashiach? Think about it. It never happens. Right? They rarely talk about Mashiach, except Chabad. right? Who wants Mashiach now? Besides that, right? Where do you see in the Haredi world they talk about Mashiach? The only thing I ever hear in the Haredi world about Mashiach is at the end of the drasha, and we should be zoicha to Mashiach meir b'yameinu. There's nothing in the drasha about it, right? Whereas the Tzioni world, it's up front, okay? Hatchalta de Gula, it's up front, right? So Reb Yaakov here comes up with what I would call for a gadol from Aguda with a chiddush. Okay, that there is makom and a schut for secular Zionism because at least it's keeping them attached. And yes,
I was just going to say, like, forget about like Shimon Peres. Like, he spoke Yiddish. He met the Chafetz Chaim. Like, he's so Jewish. I don't know if but like when I read this, I always think of like American Jewry, like 67, 73, and now you see it with October 7th. It's like it gave them like more wind to keep flying.
Like Reb Yaakov said what you said about 67. He went crazy about that because he saw that the whole Baal Tshuva movement.
Right.
Okay, and when you talk about people are still assimilating in America. Right. But you know how many more would have assimilated without?
But it was also because the Yom Kippur War. It's interesting, like a lot happened in world history in the 60s that made American Jews, like some went to yeshivas to get out of the draft, and some went to Israel to volunteer on kibbutzim,
Correct. And Reb Yaakov encouraged the guys who got out of the draft to go to the secular kibbutzim. Whenever he met secular parents, he said, "Did your son go work on a kibbutz yet?"
Really?
Yes. Really? And the people used to say, what? He said, no, he's got to go work on a second. You got to help the Dinah Yisrael. Now, Yaakov helped the Dinah Yisrael. It's great. Why? He wanted him to marry a girl from the kibbutz.
Exactly.
And not marry out.
Right.
Okay? So Reb Yaakov used to push it. Now, Reb Yaakov didn't come into contact with so many secular people. He was a little bit in that, not in that world, right? But whenever he came in contact, he pushed it. He pushed it because of the fact that, and after 67, he saw the Baal Tshuva movement coming from the two ends, from the Vietnam War, because they protested Vietnam and they had to go to yeshiva, right? In order to get out of the draft. So you got these fry guys in yeshiva become frum because they had to get out of the draft, and the other people coming to Eretz Yisrael. So when did Ar Sameach start? When did Chappelle's in its origin begin? Right, Chappelle's in its origin began, right? I don't know why I'm not clear all of a sudden. Chappelle's in its inception with Rabbi Bravender began in about 1968. Okay, Eish HaTorah came a little bit later because he split up with Or Sameach.
And Shar Yashuv was part of that.
Shar Yashuv was, yes, it was the American branch of the hippies,
right?
Who spoke out against Vietnam War. He was the American branch. Really? And Shlomo Carlebach in San Francisco was the West Coast branch of that, so to speak. Okay? That's all right after 67. Okay? So that's what Reb Yaakov also saw that. And Reb Yaakov said to me, I made a mistake that I didn't learn English. That's what he said. I should have learned English because the Bali Tshuva can't speak to me.
Your grandfather
didn't feel comfortable enough to speak with Bali Tshuva in English.
Oh.
Said I should have learned it. Right? Okay, but let's get back to this. So that's what he says over here about secular Zionism, that it also has a schus. Okay? Which I'm very glad that Rabbi Daniel Neustadt wrote this because he could have left it out because it gives them the secular Zionist also a schut here, and that's it. Okay? So now, let's go on to the third place that Reb Yaakov discusses his NCSY weekend. And here you're going to see something very different. Okay? Now, I have to give you some background. As you know, in Sefer Shmuel, this is page 1 of on top, I think it says February 23rd. Maybe it doesn't say in your top, but it's page 1, all right, after the introduction. Okay. And here, Reb Yaakov's talking about Sefer Shmuel, Shmuel Aleph, chapter Zayin Pasuk Beis. Background. You know that the Jews in this time, right? Shmuel is already growing up. He's already a Navi, right? And Mishkan Shiloh is standing on its own, right? And there is a war, right? And they lose Mishkan Shiloh, the place either is destroyed physically or it's just run over by the Philistines. And now the Aron, right, is not in Jewish possession anymore. It's in possession of the Plishtim. Only for 6 months, if I remember correctly. And then they get hemorrhoids and they send it back, right? They send it back, right? Now, where does it get sent to? At the end, it gets to Beit Shemesh. I hate to do this because everybody I'm talking to tonight is from Beit Shemesh, so I don't want to really bring this up. But it gets to Beit Shemesh, and a fair amount of people are killed looking into the Aron, whatever that means. Okay, so I'm assuming that you guys wouldn't have made that mistake, but once it went there, it had to go somewhere else, and it went to Telstone, the Kiryat Yearim. Okay, and it was in the house of Aminadab. Okay. Beit Aminadab. Okay, how long was it there? It was there for 20 years. Okay, now take a look at the pasuk. Vayehi miyom sheves ha'oren. This is page Shin Mem Vav on the on the left column and towards the bottom. Vayehi miyom sheves ha'oren b'kiryat Yearim. Vayirbu hayomim. Vayiyu esrim shana. Vayanohu kol beis Yisrael acharei Hashem. It was when the Aron was dwelling, right, was sitting in Kiryat Yearim, and the days became many, right, as 20 years, and Vayinohu, which is not a clear thing, what it means. According to most people, it means the Jewish people were drawn to go after God. Okay, very unclear pasuk. Like, what the heck is this saying here? Why do we need this? Know how long the Aron was there, and the Jewish people are now are being drawn to God, right? Why was it there for so long, right? Don't forget, we have a Mishkan. We have a Mishkan called Nov. We have a Mishkan after that called Givon, but now it's in the time of Nov. Okay. There's a Mishkan there without an Aron. Now you already see where Reb Yaakov is going. You have a Mishkan in Israel, right? The second base of Midrash in Israel without an Aron. You have a Mishkan in Israel without an Aron. And Reb Yaakov was looking at this pasuk. So watch what Reb Yaakov does. Twofold. L'chora ho'ach esrim shana dekra heim shekvar molach David. This 20 years goes all the way to the time of David. Okay, because David is the one that brings the Aron up from Kiryat Yearim to Yerushalayim. Not without a problem, by the way. There is a little problem that happens, but for 6 months later, it does finish off, right? But David brings it up. Now, if David brought up the Aron, so this is 20 years, right? It's already the time of David. Of course, Shmuel is dead. Shmuel died before Shaul. Okay, and this is where David's already king. Okay. This is after the death of Shmuel. So who wrote this? That's the first question Reb Yaakov has. That's less relevant to us, but it's an interesting question. Who wrote this? According to my opinion, the reason why this pasuk is set aside like a whole parsha. As you know, a whole parsha means 2 stumot, right? 2 new paragraphs, so to speak. And if you look in your Tanach, you will see that this one pasuk is its own like place. There's a stuma before and a stuma after. It's a parenthetic statement. It was put in by who? Nosan HaNavi and Gad HaChozeh. Now, at the beginning, it looks like Reb Yaakov went to Hebrew University. He starts toying with the text, right? But Reb Yaakov doesn't bother to explain that the Gemara in Baba Basra asks, well, we call this Sefer Shmuel. Shmuel dies in the middle. Who finished it? So the Gemara says, Gad HaChozeh and Nosan HaNavi. So it's not such a far jump to say that this was put in by Nosan HaNavi and Gad HaChozeh. The only question is why they put it in. Right? Why did they want to tell you that it took 20 years to get the Aron back? Okay? But that's what Reb Yaakov is going to discuss next. But the first question is, Who put it in? Because Shmuel's not alive anymore. Okay, by the time the Aron gets moved 20 years later, he's not alive anymore. Ubemet, Efsher, Shepasik Zeh Hinahu, right? Tam Amai Lo Iviu Aron Lenov Givon Kishikimu Sham Kol HaMishkan. This pasuk was put in here, you know why? As the reason why they didn't bring the Aron to Nov and Givon when they established the Mishkan. Why not? Madua Nishar Beveit Avinadav, right? Why did it remain in the house of Avinadav in Kiryat Ye'arim? Ulefikach hitim Hanavi mipnei shekol hazman she'Ye'arim Elokim shelo b'mkomo hayam karov l'tshuva. They wanted this pasuk was there in order to give us a reason, a tam, right? A reason. The Navis give us a reason why all the time the Aron was not in its proper place. The Jews, the Jewish people were being drawn to God. Why? If the Aron's not in its right place, this means something is wrong here, and we got to do tshuva. The after the lefikach nokan loshem v'inohu, which is a strange language. Shehu miloshem bechi. Okay, Rashi has two pshatim. Loshem bechi means they cry. Kolomar hahamshacha haita mipas shebachu al ma shekavod shemayim yorud. The Jewish people were crying and being drawn to God from the kivun that Kvod Shemayim was Yerud. How did they know Kvod Shemayim is on the downs? If the Oren's not in the Mishkan, right? Rashi brings both pshatim. That one Bechia, and then Menachem he says that it is I think Menachem says Bechia and Rashi says Loshen Hamshacha. So Reb Yaakov sort of fetches both in here, right? If you look at the Das Mikra, because I checked the Das Mikra tonight, and I'll read you just the piece of the Das Mikra. He says, Hitablu al Churban Shiloh v'golut hashchina. That's what there was the Aron never was put back. The Aron still, the Shechina is still begalut. Okay? Now, the Reb Yaakov is going to go on to talk about, you can guess. He says, and that's why in the second base of Mikdash, they didn't bring up the Aron. Correct? Why? Because it wasn't the Geula. Now Reb Yaakov has a text that says the same thing. Okay? That they didn't bring the Aron. Reb Yaakov says to Nov, not to Nov, right? Because Rabbi Yaakov says, you see from the text, the Aron was Matzav Yerud. They wanted Shmuel wanted them to know that there's no Geula Shlema here. We're not bringing the Aron back until you do tshuva, the proper tshuva. Who brings it back? David. And Rabbi Yaakov is going to discuss why David is able to bring it back. What happened? Did the Jews actually do tshuva? We'll probably see that next week. But what I want to point out is that what are we talking about now for the first time? There's a galut in Eretz Yisrael, and the Jews, it's not an MTSY weekend. It's not a weekend. The Jews are not going to be leaving Eretz Yisrael. This is the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, but it's in a matzav of galut in Eretz Yisrael. That's basically what Reb Yaakov is saying. He never says in this piece, and the Jews are going to be chased out because he knows it's not happening, right? What happens is David comes, he wants to build the basement. Shlomo comes, builds the basement. They're in Eretz Yisrael for hundreds of years. But the Aron is not in its proper place to send us the message that it's not a complete geula right now. So that's very much matim to Eretz Yisrael today, right? So you don't have to say that Reb Yaakov, anytime he spoke about NCSY weekend, and when the guy said to Reb Yaakov, what about Eretz Yisrael today? And Reb Yaakov said, you said it, not me. Here Reb Yaakov clearly writes that, Yeah, Eretz Yisrael's could be in a matzav of galut, not a complete gula. He wouldn't even call maybe atchalta de gula. Depends. Or you could say atchalta gula or sofa galut, right? You could use it and say either one, right? But clearly, Reb Yaakov is using this idea, right? He's using this theory that he has over here as well, right? Even though the Jews are not going to be leaving Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so that's why I'm saying to you, it's not pasha to say that Rabbi Yaakov held that we're going to be leaving Eretz Yisrael again after this long weekend from 1948 till today, or from who knows when. At the end of the day, when I spoke to Rabbi Yaakov, he didn't say that to me. He said to me that the houses you see in Mattersdorf are going to be the same houses when Mashiach comes. That's what he said to me. That's the lashon he used. So we are in a matzav that the Aron's not ready to go back into the Beis Hamikdash. But okay, next week we'll already see about David HaMelech, why he was able to bring the Aron back, and we'll see the piece on Sefer Malachim. That's I'm just going to give you the piece on Sefer Malachim. I found that piece by Baron Soloveitchik and the Tzitz Eliezer. All use the same pasuk in Malachim for the same idea, but each one has a little bit of a different twist. And we'll see that next week, Bezrat Hashem.
Okay. Yeshar Koach, thank you.
Yeshar Koach.
Okay, sure. We'll be in touch.
Good luck
Thank
with the jet lag.
Thank you. I need it.
Thanks,